Well, hello and welcome to the next of the Career Insight sessions sponsored by nabs. This is Trevor Cape here, and I've been helping people through career transformation and change for many years. And we've helped thousands of people really upshift into better career situations, really focused in on the marketing and advertising and communication space. And nabs is an incredible charity, and nabs does a ton of great work helping families in this unique industry. And so today we're going to be looking at how to apply for a job. There are many different ways to apply for a job, and there is no set, fixed way that one must do it. But as we're applying for a job, we need to recognize that we're creating a connection, we're creating an engagement here. So what we're doing here, and hello. We're looking at how do we get the connection point we want to get. You may find that you're applying for a job because you've seen it posted somewhere, and there are many people who are applying to jobs for which they may not even be barely qualified for. And social media like LinkedIn is a tremendous place to be, and Twitter is another great way to keep your finger on the pulse of what's moving in agencies and spaces, and what opportunities are there. One thing to remember is that when you're applying for a job, it can be very tempting to get right into the trap of the job description. Someone somewhere along the line has articulated what they think they need in the job, and if you're so locked in on exactly what that is, you might be missing a bigger picture, right? So what I would encourage everybody to do as we're moving into this space is let's connect with the people that need to know that we exist, need to know that we care. Great quote is, it's like we don't care how much you know until we know how much you care, right? And so one way of applying for a job, some people can be very, strong and in their backstory, have look at how much they've done and how many great things they've done for so many people. But if that interviewer is not actually feeling the care that you have for them or the company, or in how you carry yourself, it might be harder for them to imagine you being, a progressive and productive part of the team. And so we need to look at that piece of the connection puzzle. So when we are applying for a job, firstly, we got to know, what are you applying for? It's very easy and very tempting when on the job search to apply for everything in sight and hope that maybe you throw all the spaghetti at the wall as the concept and some of it sticks, and or they might say, well, it's a numbers game. And sure, of course, if you're reaching out to 100 different people to try and look for work, you're going to have a different potency and pressure system and effectiveness than someone who is just casually reaching out, sporadically to just a few. So having that concept of who you are and where you're going is a very powerful thing to get on top of before you get into the actual work of, say, writing a cover letter or amending your resume a little bit. And we'll talk about both of those aspects, for the preset role. So where are you going? I think this is one of those questions when we're on the job search. The better we can address that question, the more we will understand what true fit looks like, and the more visible we will be to the people who want to find us, right? So if you find that you are adjusting your resume substantially for different opportunities, then it might be worth stepping back and saying, well, who am I and what do I want? Because there's a good chance that the energy of your self-concept may be spread over many different areas, and it might be harder for you to kind of resonate as the perfect fit in the place that would be a perfect fit for you. Because if you do your prospecting well, and you figure out which companies are going to be the kind of companies that like working with people like you, well, then you're going to find yourself an audience where they're going to appreciate who you are and where you're coming from and what you can do, right? So applying for the job, we got to get the self-concept clear. And so when you're looking at how is your self-concept most effectively and commonly expressed? Well, you'll see it on the headline you choose for LinkedIn. You'll probably see it at the top of your resume. If you're wise, the top of your resume is going to have somewhat of a promise to it, and it may be called a profile statement. Maybe it's a headline. There's going to be a few pieces of information that immediately locate whoever is taking a look at that resume. You're just going to locate them into your core value proposition. Who are you? Why should they care enough to read on to the rest of your resume? Right at the top of your resume, you have a chance to grip them. And that grip has got to be aligned to the needs that your reader has, right? So the job description as it's posted will definitely give you some clues, and it's worth taking a look at that and saying, okay, well, the way that I described myself last year on LinkedIn, it might not be the same as you could re-announce yourself on LinkedIn now, that might be more aligned to the actual job that you're looking for. And if it's actually true and right, then you have the ability to step into that power and look like a great fit, because you are a great fit at that point. You're putting your mind to it. You're taking care to connect with the right companies. You're looking at the job description, and you're probably recognizing that you've got at least 75% of what they're asking for. If it's less than that, it would take some kind of miracle. But, miracles happen all the time. So, that can't be dismissed entirely. But for the most part, if you have a substantial part of what they're looking for, and you like the look of the organization, and you like the business problem that you're going to be able to wrap your arms around, then yeah, absolutely, you're going to want to put a concentrated effort on creating a better connection there. And so that connection, will probably include, if you're seeing it posted on LinkedIn, there will, in most cases, there will be a formal application process, and where you'll have to send your resume through. And a cover letter might be optional, right? It seems that half of people really love cover letters, read them meticulously, and the other half don't really even bother, or maybe there's a little surface skim there. I'm a big fan of the cover letter. I think the cover letter is a very important locator. If they choose not to read it, that's on them. But if you choose to put your intelligence in connecting the dots for them and help them see why you are a perfect fit for this role, why you're a candidate that they should be connecting with and communicating with, that cover letter is a wonderful invitation. So, unless you are explicitly asked for, a long cover letter, sometimes there could be an extensive expression of interest process, especially for some executive positions. Then you can go over a page, right? But typically, I wouldn't encourage you to make a cover letter more than about 2/3 or 3/4 of a page, and you could put a lot of white space on it. You don't have to cram it with information. If it's already a bit of an elective piece in the hiring process, if it looks really engageable and short, more people will read it. And if it's engageable and short, well, you're probably taking the time to potentize it a bit. I like to think about vitamin content in communications. And can you pack in 100 watts of energy in 3 sentences when it takes the rest of the world 10 sentences? If you can potentize your communications and get right to the point, you're saving everybody time, making everybody more efficient, and really deepening the connection so everybody knows who you are and where you're going. Right? So this process that you go through in the cover letter to think about, okay, well, what do you want to say in the cover letter? You want to certainly express that you're interested and you believe that you'd be a great fit or could make a wonderful contribution. You're going to want to then have a few compelling points as to why. Maybe it's a few key successes you've had in this area include, or maybe it's key strengths include. But imagine a few bullet points with some space around it so that we can receive distinct, well-curated impressions of exactly who you are and what foot you are putting forward for this particular application. Your cover letter, If you're looking for very similar types of roles, you probably don't have to change the cover letter that much. There might be a little nuance or tone, or you could personalize it, and maybe there's something that's highly relevant to that particular position or company. But but when we're looking at the cover letter, you really want to just give them an opportunity to get a few good repeatable points in about you. When you're making a good case for candidacy, in a role, you're going to want to plant some sound bites. You're going to want your advocates who meet you and like you to have something that they can say about you, and you know what it is. You can have an hour conversation, and if the best that the interviewer can come out with is seems pretty likable and competent, it's okay, that's good, but why? Why that person? You got to always imagine whoever you're interviewing with, they're going to have to report back to their boss about why you, why that person. So you can get really in front of this, and a cover letter is a great way to distill your thoughts, and really get in front of the mission as to why it is you want to work there, and why they should want to work with you. Then we're looking at the resumes. You're going to want to tailor your resume appropriately, and you may find that there's some buzz language being used. And there are systems and programs that are set up to catch the words that they're looking for, or is LinkedIn is determining that you're a potential fit for this role. And they might proactively put it on the radar there. So it's very helpful to make sure that you've got the language of the moment, the language of your space. What are people like you called now in today's market, right? It might be a little bit different. And I'm sure there's some people in the call that are upshifting from one career phase to another, and we'll open that up a little bit later in the coaching component. But it's quite possible to shift into your next space by finding the language of it, getting on the frequency of it. Whatever you did up to this point should have prepared you to be able to make a good, credible representation of your skills and your will and your passion, so that you can move forward and be the chosen candidate. I think when applying for a job, you're going to want to learn a little bit about the company, right? So it's a very different experience when you're interviewing someone who is studied on the company and the opportunity versus someone who's just a little bit green and wide open. Coming in with a point of view helps. Coming in with perspectives. If you're interested enough to go to the interview, then I recommend you be interested enough to really understand what's happening with the company so that you can meet them top to top. Give them a sense of what it's like working with you. Now granted, this is beyond the application process, but overall, most jobs have an element of socializing yourself into it, right? And I'm going to talk about socializing yourself into it a bit, because sometimes people will, do all this work to put together a great application. They submit it, they look, they can see that maybe 220 other people have also applied, and then they have their own sort of discouragement factor. It's hard to know too. If you're applying for a role and you look like you're incredibly well qualified, you have most of what they're asking for, and you know that you could do it, and you could do a great job, and you see that there's 220 other applicants that have applied, can be a little discouraging, right? So I would ask you to consider that there are probably plenty of people that have applied that do not have 70 to 80% of what's needed there. Not every application is a valid application. So it's hard to know, how many people that are really at your level, that really do have credible experience and, will resonate. But you probably don't want to just leave it to the submission process, Then, of course, many organizations have a bit of a don't call us, we'll call you kind of thing. But it is also a hot market. And, there's a lot of movement happening right now. And it is great for the people that make decisions to understand what they're working with. Who are you? How can you be on the radar of the hiring manager? Maybe you could comb your LinkedIn network and see, do you know other people that are working there? If you do, boy, it would be really wonderful to have a connection point with them, to discover a little bit about, what's their experience. If part of your research process includes interviewing a few people along the fly, hey, I see you worked at this agency last year and they have an opening this year. Can I catch a few minutes on the phone with you just to find out a little bit about the highs and lows of that experience? And it can be really helpful. I mean, you might discover that you really want to work at a place that you were only lukewarm about. Or it's like, whoa, that's 10-foot pole country. I'm staying way away from that, right? It's easier to make wise decisions about where you're going when you know what's important to you. And it's easier to make a strong application when you have the conviction of knowing what you want to do, and it's that thing, right? Because there's life is getting very potent, and there are many opportunities in the market, and energy fit is an important thing, and part of that is diversity. This is not a non-diverse message. This is diversity is so important. In fact, companies that have diversity in their hiring strategy and the way they operate their company tend to record 30% higher profits than those that are non-diverse, right? So while there may be a tendency for some people or hiring managers to hire in their own image, there's a lot of training that's going on to help people sidestep that. We all make first impressions, and we all receive first impressions, right? And so we got to think about, well, what first impression are we making? How can we do that? Well, if it's starting with the application, then you're probably going to want to look at how does the typesetting look on your resume and on your cover letter. Does it look like it comes from the same family of communications? Does the brand of you have a consistent tone? Is it appealing? Some fonts make you want to read them, and some don't, right? And especially for people in this industry, we should be really tuned into these dynamics. And it's every step of the way in looking for a new job is a little bit of experience management. So you're managing the experience of whoever has to read your resume or your cover letter, and it's like, is this going to be a nutritious document? Are they going to get some potent high value things out of that? Are they going to be able to easily connect the dots between what they're asking for and what you're doing? So in terms of what you're going to call out on the cover letter when applying for a job, well, you're probably going to take a good close look at the job description, because that is going to tell you how they've chosen to prioritize the skills and aptitudes that they're looking for. And it's worth taking a look and saying, okay, these things that they're asking for, what is my best example of having a success in that territory? Maybe you've had a success doing exactly the same thing for the same kind of company, and it's very easy to say, oh yeah, I've done exactly that, and I can do it in my sleep. That's a recruiter's dream. It's an easy placement. But sometimes the more rewarding placements are not just doing more of what you already know. It's gathering from what you've known and being able to carve a new path and do something new. So if they're looking for you to be a champion of, let's say, performance, people, and profit, if these are things that they're looking for in the job description, then you're probably going to want to think about, okay, well, what's the best time that I can reflect on, in my career where I've exemplified performance, or what's my best profit story? Is there a captivating story? There's always a better way to tell a story. And coming at that with that spirit of going, hey, there's probably a better way to tell your own career story than you used to tell it. And if we're about kind of stepping into a whole new territory, we're going to have to step into a new self-concept. And that new self concept has to feel real. Like it's got to be like that's who you are. It's what you're doing now. It's as you're getting into the mindset of like applying for jobs, you're probably going to want to be doing market research as well and going, okay, well, what are the other companies in this space? I seem to be drawn to this company. Who else is kind of like that? You're probably going to need that information anyways as you're immersed in the market. But in doing so, you meet the players, right? It's good to say I'm currently interviewing with a number of companies to determine who needs what I'm bringing to the market right now. Even if interviews are kind of coming a little bit sporadically, or you can also take initiative and go interview people and go and talk to them. There are a lot of organizations that are willing to have informational interviews. And if you're referred in by someone who is known and trusted within that organization, well, it's like, why wouldn't they want to have a meeting with you? Like, someone has is highly recommending you, right? So there will be a universe of people you can tap into that know you and believe in you and would have good things to say about you. You know, these types of people sometimes we can overlook on the job search journey because when we're in the job search journey, sometimes we can feel a little more alone. And I would like to encourage everybody to remember that, hey, you have a network of people who are aware of you, that have worked with you, that probably have some good things to say about you. They might know the very people that you need to be talking to right now. Is there a way that you can warm up those conversations? LinkedIn is wonderful in that it can show you that you can search for people that have been, say, at that company, and you can discover, well, where is the experience in my network? And if you've been diligent about connecting with people and have been maintaining your network, then you probably have a well self-updated address book and an idea of who you might be able to reach out to and invite a conversation and make it reciprocal the best you can. Maybe there's something you can help them with. Taking real interest in them. Not just because it makes strategic sense, but being in that place of care and support. All the best networking and job search seems to have a bit of an upward push to it. Who needs my help right now? There's some folks that need the particular work that I do. And, for each person on this call, what that work is going to be a little different. After this call, a little piece of homework for you. Easy. Go to your LinkedIn headline and ask yourself, is this the best headline I can put forward right now? I'm sure there's, we have an opportunity to capture people's attention with a few basic, concepts. Is there a key word that captures the value you create? Can you make this central to your identity and job search now? Can you be the person who is, let's say, a master of data? If that's your space, then people who are introducing you to the people that you need to know. Wow, if you get introduced as a master of data, if this is what you're really championing and the conversations that you want to have and the expertise that you want to be recognized and esteemed for, then owning it, like it's like building a brand around that space. you know, making agencies famous. I've heard that. It's a great one, and it's like, hey, there's an opportunity for the world to understand who you are and what you can do. And, when applying for a job, there's the traditional classic route, but also socializing it and be aware that whoever is actually getting your resume and considering you, they're probably going to be doing a Google search on you. They're probably going to be looking you up on LinkedIn. They're probably going to identify, oh, this person also knows that person and that person. There might be a few informal conversations that are going on. These are not formal reference checks or anything, and just kind of a little pre-discovery. So if you recognize that you have a common bond between, like you and someone at that organization that you want to go work for, and there's someone in between, well, it would be really lovely to kind of warm up that connection. Maybe you like you reacquaint yourself with that person. Maybe give them a chance to understand who you've been since they saw you last. Maybe there are new things that some of the people who like you need to know about what you're up to now. Here's a question that most job searchers, could ask themselves a lot more frequently. What are you selling now? Like, who are you? What are you selling? We're all kind of selling something in terms of, developing work, and developing opportunities. And some people are doing it, in a way that it's more visible and clear that way because maybe they're running their own agency or doing some independent consulting, either because that's what they love or maybe they're between roles and that's a good thing to do between roles, take on a little bit of client work and, stay on it. But there's an opportunity there to really, reimagine who are you, and what are you selling? Like, what do you want people to know you to be? And not only will this help you secure the opportunities to get your conversations with the people you need to be talking to or interviews, this is also going to help you move through interviews because if you have a level of determined conviction then that you can communicate about your area of authority, that's very attractive. It's like who wouldn't want the designer that that really just is totally passionate about design? Who wouldn't want the customer relationship management expert that you would expect that person to love people and to want to work with people and to be able to handle the multiple parts and herd the cats and keep the budgets all together and all of these kinds of things. Not everybody is naturally suited to every role, of course, right? But sometimes when we're in transition, you know, everything starts to look like it might be a good fit, right? And when everything seems like, well, maybe I could do that, then often it can kind of weaken your conviction about your core area of determination. Are you really that person anymore now that you've imagined yourself as so many different things, right? And determination is a really interesting word, and I think it's a useful word to think about, when we're on the job search, because we determine, we determine what work we want to do now. We determine what our offering is. We determine what kind of people and companies that we want to work with. We determine how many hours a week we're willing to put into the job search. We determine really schedules and timelines. You would be amazed after coaching thousands of people, the number of people that have adopted the strategy of designing a timeline, and somehow the market meets them in the timeline. They're like, okay, well, what is it now? It's June now, so I'm taking June to rediscover myself, July to perfectly articulate who I am and what I'm coming to market, and sort of begin some discussions to start networking. And I'm envisioning that I will be in the interview phase in the early September and getting ready to start October 1st. Maybe that timeline is someone's timeline here. Maybe another person here is ready to start their new job in 3 weeks and has 4 interviews lined up. Some things are moving quick, but it does help to really understand, what do you really want? Because very often, when we're in the job search, there may be other factors that alter our energy field. Maybe all of a sudden domestic commitments go up. Maybe you spend some more time with children. Maybe maybe you realize that, oh, there are some home projects you could get to, and it feels good to do that. And then it is possible to really change your energy by tending to other priorities in life. And then it comes back to this, to the interviewing phase, and you're going to want to be, potent, on track, ready to dive in and hit the ground running, so to speak, right? So doing the things and reimagining yourself in the way that allows you to just say, hey, this is the station I'm on now. It's almost like in our careers, we're always turning the dial until we kind of might stay on one station for a little while, go to another radio station for a little while, and it's kind of sometimes it's weird fidelity. It gets kind of crackly. You can't quite hear it when opportunities are coming and going. And then it comes into focus and then it's right there. So lining yourself up with that and just going, okay, well, if you're applying for a marketing communications role, for example. What is going to win them over and inspire them that you are a marketing communicator, that you're wise and you're capable, and that the way that you do it has an art to it that will inspire and influence. So this is worth considering. Looking now at applying for different kinds of jobs. I mean, there are some jobs that are like general kind of, I used to call it the cattle call. And some are very precise with very specific timelines, and some organizations have a very regimented hiring process, where you can ask things like, oh, what's the next step in the process? Not that that's always the best question to ask, but there's a process to follow. And then certainly, I mean, being in marketing, communications, advertising, it can be a little wild. They might not know what they want or need. They may be still trying to extract that from the client. And so just really kind of taking the time to build the relationship and the trust is so important, because it's professional services. And when we're in marketing and communications, this is like we are delivering a professional service. And so that service, the words and the suggestions, the strategic advice, the design concepts, the website, whatever area of focus you happen to be in your space, you own that and you bring it, and you can inspire and influence people with your ownership of this space. And so when you're applying for a job, you can kind of like, get into the headspace of who the recruiter is. And just go, okay, what are their touch points going to be? It's probably going to be your cover letter. It's going to be your resume. It's going to be your entire, digital footprint. It's going to be your LinkedIn. It's going to be what people informally say about you. So, if you know that someone that knows the hiring manager, get them to put in a good word for you, a warm nudge, reconnect with them. You're also going to be, if you're in the application process, you're probably lining up your references too. So, somewhere along the line, someone's going to say, can you give us a few references? And usually it's 3 to 5. If it's 3, you might have, a couple of people you reported into, maybe someone who worked beside you, maybe someone who reported into you, maybe a client perspective. But, the most important ones, the ones that carry the most weight, tend to be the person you reported into, and most recently. And sometimes there may be cases where, interpersonal differences happen. Maybe you got on with everyone in the company except your boss. Or maybe that person just happened to be somewhat incorrigible. Oh, well, gee, it's the last person that you want to have as your reference, but probably the one they want to talk to the most. Well, see if you can, yeah, I mean, there's a couple of options when that happens. One is, find another senior influence person there, someone who's, can champion, the good message and speak well on your behalf. Or, reconnect with that person and see how things are with them, and see if you can reflect back on some of the strengths. See if they'd be willing to be a reference before you even put them forward. And see if you can have 5 minutes on the phone with them or 10 minutes and reconnect and say, okay, looking back on our time together, I'm really particularly proud of how we worked together to achieve this, and this. Would you agree? And would you be willing to be a reference for me? And some of the things that they're going to be most interested in probably is the strategic capability or the client relationship management piece. Would you agree that did you always feel good with me doing that? And find out where they're really at. And if they have glowing words to say, then great. Line them up. And it also reminds you of who you are in the process. So applying for a job, we also, how soon do you follow up? This question comes. I'm kind of inclined to follow up, weekly, unless given indication otherwise, right? So maybe even 2 weeks, but if you want it, stay on it. and having been at the other side of this, and the candidates that loop back a few times, they all of a sudden you're remembering their name. They're on the radar. They're in the pool. They're in the field because they put themselves there. So one takeaway from this call, if you're gonna have it, is if you're going to apply for a job on LinkedIn, don't consider that you've completed the entire task of applying for a job. Get creative. How else can you get their attention? How else can you start conversations? If you haven't heard anything from them in a week, follow up and say, hey, further considering this position, I think it would be a wonderful fit. I look forward to picking up our conversation as soon as convenient. Or hey, I saw this article and thought of you. And would love to deepen our discussion around this. I guess that's usually post-interview conversations, but sometimes even getting on their radar. You've submitted the application, the cover letter, crickets. You're like, okay, now what? But you still want it. Find a way to loop back. Kind of, it's like let them know that you've applied, let them know that you're very interested, and invite a conversation. If you see something that would be helpful or informative, pass it along to them. What would a person like you operate like if you were in the role? And that's just magical. And when you can kind of get that thinking, then the words that you find to be able to execute the cover letter, the resume, they'll be the language of the space and the language of the role. All right. I'm going to put it into the chat. Are there any questions that people have about applying for job? We're going to move it open to open coaching, but in a few minutes. But I just want to check the pulse and see, are there any particular issues that have come up around this area of applying for a job and how to apply for a job? Okay, great. Thank you. AI and bots reading resumes. Oh, that's a good one. Okay, as we're looking at this particular issue, there's this is part of the screening process in a lot of places, right? Now, there's a lot of systems that are set up to be able to catch the right words, their word count. Certainly in in very structured, formal places, this is commonplace. Government, and remember that whoever is deciding that they have this level of work that requires them to hire someone, that's a person that made that decision, right? So all of the bots are happening in service to the search for the role, which is in service to the person that is ultimately accountable for the role. So it's a bit of a two-way street. I mean, yes, you absolutely want to use the language that they're asking for, because there are people who will just be doing that surface level scan, like how many words seem to match, right? But that's not a deep conversation, and no one's going to get a job just because their words match. They're going to get a job because they are the trusted person by the person who needs it, right? And so you know, while yes, it makes sense to be sensitive to and tuned into that reality, it's also important to say, hey, maybe the job search strategy requires more than just bot navigation. There's a socializing of your ask. There's an illuminating your network to your capabilities and your availability. And hey, even on your social medias, if you can, post a little something from time to time. Remind the world you exist. Share some things that you're thinking about. What would be inspiring to the people you want to be inspiring? Maybe there's some things that you see. Maybe you have a new take on a world event, or maybe there's an article that you have an intelligent commentary to share, or the article itself stands on its own, and it's like, wow, what a great thing. I wish everyone in my space knew this. Share it, because as you do, it's like people recognize that that's the frequency you're on. You're the person who's thinking about these amazing things. right? So this is part of that the kind of hustle, in a sense, and it's really just a hustle to be yourself, right? If you're really like, if it's draining all your energy to be having conversations about the work you say you want, challenge yourself. Is this really the work I want? Right? Because it's the person who shows up with the potency and the energy that of the conviction of this is completely within my capabilities. I would really love to help you with this. They're the person that is probably going to win over the audience. All right. Okay. Thanks. So yes, the follow-ups. I mean, if you get a decided message of, okay, they've got their candidates, or maybe they've hired, made a different direction. There's no harm in reaching back a couple months later and finding out how that all worked out. You know, I was doing some more thought about that role we were having conversation about, and I know you made a hire, but wondering how that's working out for you. Is everything on track? I'd love to stay on your radar as you look to evolve this. You may or may not be available then either, but just to be that person that doesn't get discouraged and sidelined prematurely. We write ourselves out of things. There are people who don't apply to jobs because they only have 95% of the credentials. There are people who don't apply to jobs because, they think their degree isn't good enough. There are people who don't apply to jobs because they're worried about, what their last boss would say. We all have our own inner limiter, so we go, okay, well, what's yours? What can we do to address that inner limiter and just say, okay, well, that's not really relevant. You know, Sometimes it takes the form of, well, wouldn't it be bugging them? Oh, I don't want to bug them. And it's like, hey, you're a marketer. You're marketing on behalf of your career right now. And marketing involves a little bit of interruption. Marketing should be interruptively great. If you're coming with a new solution that they don't have yet, and you believe it's the best thing for them, get behind it and sell it convincingly. Because as you put together the message, and as you recognize that you have the component pieces to be able to really do this job, your application is going to resonate with that certainty that you've put into it by pre-thinking it, and you know predetermining that it's aligned to who you are and where you're going. Right? And it makes conversations flow a lot more easily. Sometimes, if you're creative, there may be some designers on the call, and if you know, it's very important to offer some samples of your work if you're in the creative space too. It might go without saying, but it's if you've got a website to link people to, or digital portfolio, something that lets us see some examples. And if you have tons of examples and you don't know what to show, take a step back and go, what's most relevant to the space? What kind of design work are you applying to do now? Are there certain sets of clients that you've worked with that are, of the nature of the client that you want to work with now? Or is it going to be an interesting, competitive point of difference that you're coming from a different space? There, I'm one of you and I'm not one of you are both great, great stories. If they're sold well, right? So you may be bringing fresh, unique perspective to your space, and if that's like a point of differentiation, then great. Own that. And if it's like, if you're accomplished, incredible, and you've worked with agencies or companies like that, spell it out. There may be places in your resume that highlight, say, the company name, and they're companies that we've heard of. You might want to bold them. If you've had a certain percentage of an upshift or growth that you've caused, highlight it, bold it. There's some things that could leap out of the resume that, in this attention-starved market, you have an ability to cut through the clutter and help people really understand who you are. So that's where we get to today on the formal part, and I'm going to turn it over to the group here and ask some people to chip in with, where are you going? What do you need help with? How can we help you out? Thanks for joining us today.